So welcome to the webinar today, everybody. Thank you for participating in those surveys. Today's session is Planning to Succeed, being presented by the knowledgeable Tom Goldner, a business consultant with our SBDC's, I can't speak today, Beyond Business Hours Consulting team. I am Allie Stevens, Training and Outreach Coordinator with the Florida SBDC at UNF. Just a friendly reminder in case you are unfamiliar with us, which I'm assuming most of you are familiar with us, but we are part of a statewide network and our mission is to help your small businesses grow and succeed. We do this by offering training and webinars like today, but also with providing no cost confidential consulting on all topics spanning all aspects of business management and growth. And as I mentioned in my introduction of Tom, we have a new program that we started last year, Beyond Business Hours Consulting, which is a group of consultants that meet with clients on your schedule, so not your general business hours, so early mornings, evenings, and even on the weekends. All the information to get in touch, if you are not already familiar with us, will be sent in an email this afternoon, not this afternoon, probably about an hour after we close the webinar. That'll have a link for you to get started with us, a phone call, a phone number to give us a call if you want to set up an appointment with Tom or somebody else. All that information will be sent out after the webinar, along with the link, because this is being recorded, so there will be a link to the recording and a quick survey. We live and breathe by your feedback. It helps us continually provide new and exciting training in the topics that you, the business owners, are interested in learning about. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tom. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Allie. Welcome everyone and good morning. Let me get started by kind of introducing myself and giving you a little bit of my background so you'll know where I'm coming from. I've had, we'll call this my third career. My first career lasted about 25 years. Was trained, educated as an engineer, and I worked for about 25 years in corporate America for Fortune 500 companies, so large corporations. My roles were in the manufacturing and engineering areas and management roles in various different capacities. But working for these large companies, I had access to a lot of training and a lot of corporate structure, so you might say, and the way big companies do things. Then after 25 years, I left that environment and I went into partnership with two of my brothers-in-law, and we purchased an ongoing business, which was a mechanical contractor. And so I managed this small business for about 7 years and ultimately sold it. But I got exposure and a quick learning curve going from the large corporate environment to a small company, and I learned a good deal of lessons, many of them the hard way, on what can and can't work and how to try to transition some of the best practices from big business to small business. And so what I will try to do in the course of talking about this material is relate some of my personal experiences, maybe some things that worked for me and some things that didn't work so well for me. And hopefully maybe you can relate to some of that. I know from the polls that it looks like each of you are relatively new, or most of you are relatively new in your business roles, and you have small teams, either you're sole proprietor or have just a handful of employees. And so how you implement this type of thing may be a little bit different based on the size of your business, and we'll try to talk about that. So with that being said, let me start moving through the material. I'm going to close my screen here so I don't have to look at myself and you don't have to look at me when I'm talking. But hopefully you can see the presentation, Plan to Succeed. And well, Allie, I'm having a problem. Okay.
You're good.
All right, it's good. It's indexing now. So the next chart there was a saying that I heard over and over again when I was in the large corporate world, in particular with the company Motorola, who I worked for about half of my corporate career. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, which is basically just saying if you don't have plans, you're not setting yourself up for success. Well, okay. The elements of the planning process, and this is what we're really going to talk about today, is what are we going to cover? The first step in the planning process is the overall business plan, creating a top-level overall business plan. Many of you may have that. If you've gone after financing or grant applications, you probably were required to create a business plan. But there are many different levels that get from the business plan down to the tactical implementation phase. And we're going to talk about the different steps and different levels that carry through that process on down to a system of governance. What's key in each of these levels is, as we go through the process and as you're doing this for your business, is reduce this to writing. A lot of times people plan things out in their head or through verbal conversations, but if it's not committed to writing, there's less commitment to it, to seeing it through. So I encourage each of you to commit these plans and systems to writing. So the 5 levels, starting with the business plan, the next level is going to be establishing goals and objectives for your business that support that business plan. And these are business level goals and individual level goals. And if you have a small business, you may be the only person within, the only employee, then your business goals are your individual goals. Then we come to an incentive system. This, of course, is important for employees that you might have, maybe not as much for you. We'll talk about different ways to incorporate incentives into the process. Then we'll get into the tactical planning section, how to create specific action plans to go attack an objective or a goal. And then finally, a system of governance or review to monitor the process to ensure that it's effective. Okay, there are really 2 different types of personalities. Obviously, there are more than 2, but 2 characteristic types of people that may influence how easy this process is for you. If you're the type of person who creates to-do lists and checklists and keeps a planner and organizes your time, then this process comes naturally to you and you may be following it pretty closely. If you're not, if you're less formal and less structured, then some of what we're talking about may be difficult for you to do. I know personally, my personality early on was not one of being a disciplined to-do list type person, and I kind of learned that or acclimated to the culture and the corporate environment over time. So you can become good at these things if you're not naturally inclined to them, but it may take some practice. So the first step is creating a business plan, and many of you hopefully have started this process and have an overall business plan. If you don't, this is something that we can work with you. If you want to connect with a consultant, we can work with you through that process. But this is typically done at the initial startup phase of a business. They're typically longer term in focus. You're looking out 3 to 5 years into the future, creating your direction of your company, defining where you want to go. And the main reason that a lot of companies do these are because they're required by lenders. Too many people or too many companies will create their business plan, possibly for lending purposes, and then once they go through and achieve the loan, that business plan goes onto a shelf and is never reviewed again and just collects dust. This is a missed opportunity because this business plan charts and sets a long-term direction for your company. And from that, you can revisit it and keep going back to it kind of as a northern star, and you calibrate your annual and even quicker than that actions and activities to contributing to achievement of your long-term business plan. I think this is one example of where I feel like I did the right things when I moved into a small business owner. I took a lot of care and time in creating a long-range business plan before we took ownership of our company, mapped out where the markets were going to be for the business we were in. We had goals to grow at a certain pace on an annual basis. And so I created a market percent share of total sales over time as we grew. And in the business we had, it was fairly easy to forecast that some of our clients and some of our customers were going to be going away because of offshoring and things like that. And so we had to plan on how we were going to replace that, what markets were we going to go into, how much do we expect to grow in those markets, and so on. So we put this plan together that showed by market to what we expected to sell. And then over time, at least on an annual basis, I and my partners would take that plan, we'd come back to it, we would look at it, and we would see how we're doing in each of those markets. Are we achieving the levels of growth that we expected? Those markets that we weren't, we would talk about what actions could we take, what plans could we take for the next year to go back and get caught up to those goals. And in some cases, it was not realistic for us to achieve our original goals. So we talked about, okay, what new things can we do? What new markets can we get into? What new directions can we go to replace this market that isn't there like we thought it would, so we can achieve our overall top level sales goals? And it caused us to relook at our planning and adjust our direction and adjust our focus on an annual basis. And from that, then we could go into the next steps, which are the annual plans, the goals, and things like that. All right, so once a business plan is created and you have it in place, the next natural step is to look at how you can use that to drive the actual activity of your business. And the next step is to create goals and objectives, typically more on a shorter term focus, maybe on an annual basis, okay? So you look at it, look at your long-term plans and what you had planned to accomplish in the next 12 months, and you set more specific goals about areas of achievement and accomplishment that are going to get you to your business plan. And these goals, as you set them, need to be SMART goals and objectives. SMART is a term which I'm assuming that many of you have heard this term before, set SMART goals. We'll talk about that here. SMART goals, SMART is an acronym, stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So any goals, business goals, or individual goals that you set need to fit each one of these categories. Specific meaning a goal that says improve quality is not a SMART goal. It's not specific enough. You're not defining how much are you going to improve quality. So just generalizations like make this better or do better in this area, that's not a good goal. It needs to be specific, defining, you know, what percent improvement that you're going to make. It needs to be measurable, okay? How are you going to measure the goal that you put in place? If you have a goal of improving quality by a certain percentage, you have to have a means of being able to measure that. There should be, it could be inspection process, or it could be a piece of equipment that measures something. It could be survey results. A lot of different tools could be your measuring devices, but you have to have a system to measure whether you're actually achieving results or not. The third thing being achievable. You have to have goals for them to be meaningful. They have to be achievable. Setting a goal, for instance, of having 0 defects may not be achievable. It may be a direction you want to go towards 0 defects, but if you're looking in the next 12 months, are you realistically going to not create any issues or any defects over the course of the year? Probably not. What you want to do is you look at what your current level of performance is and set a target of improvement by the end of the year that's on the path of getting to where your longer term goals are. If ultimately you want to be as close to 0 as possible, maybe you want to say a 50% improvement or 75% improvement of today's level. So then you would set that. If your product yield is 90% good now, maybe you want to set a goal to be at 96% by the end of the year. That's realistically achievable. Not only they need to be relevant, the goals that you set need to be relevant. You don't want to set a goal for an employee in an area that they may not have anything to do with it. An example might be if you have a company where you have a maintenance person who takes care of your equipment or what they're focused internally. Their job is to maintain your equipment, keep the equipment up and running, keep it doing what it needs to do so that you don't have downtime. Well, having a goal for that employee being achieving customer survey results for outside customers of a certain percent, that wouldn't be relevant because what they're doing is internally focused. It may not directly have an impact on external customer satisfaction, so it wouldn't be a relevant goal. And finally, the goals need to be time bound. You need to define what specific achievement needs to take place and when, say by the end of the year, or in a lot of cases, you're going to have interim goals. They won't just be end of the year. Maybe it's to be by the end of first quarter, we're going to be at this level. At the end of June, we're going to be at this level. And then finally, at the end of the year, at the end of December, we're going to be at this third level. So defining what we want to achieve by a certain point in time. Okay. We need to align our goals within the company. And this may not be as big of a deal for a lot of you because being small companies with only a handful of employees or mainly or possibly even sole proprietorships, getting your whole workforce aligned behind the company goals isn't as big of a challenge because the goals that you set may be just for yourself or 1 or 2 others. But if you happen to have a good number of employees, it's critical that you get individual goals aligned and supporting company goals. And so you have to be good with the communication side. You have to communicate with employees how you're doing, how the company is doing against its goals. It could be posting information in break rooms or on a bulletin board or someplace where companies can see it, so they see what the goal is and then we're tracking your performance and you see how close we are to achieving it, so they become engaged in the process. It could be having meetings where you communicate this to them. Maybe you have a monthly meeting with your employees and you communicate how the performance is against the different key process indicators. And finally, you need to have some form of rewards and recognition which ties into that goal achievement. Employees need to be motivated towards the achievement of goals, and they need to be motivated to take action towards the achievement of the goals. You as a business owner, obviously you're motivated by that, but employees may or may not have or feel as big a stake in the success of the business. But if you can reduce the business goals to some individual goals that they have more ownership of and tie rewards and recognition to that, it'll motivate them to become more engaged in the actual improvement process. Okay, so more about rewards and recognition. You want it to motivate the desired results. and you don't want to create some unhealthy competition. Let me give you an example of a mistake that I made with the small business that I managed. One of the things when we went into taking ownership of this business, there was no incentive compensation for the employees. There was nothing to drive them to go above and beyond their normal duties or to get better. So we implemented incentive plans for the employees. And in particular, we implemented a commission system for our salesmen. And when we set up the commission system, the big mistake that I originally made was I based the incentive plan on gross total sales, okay? And I had one salesperson who bid very low on certain jobs to win more jobs so they would get more compensation. And then, of course, of doing that, took on jobs at a much lower margin than we should have taken. And we left a lot of money on the table for several jobs. So very quickly, I had to go back and change that commission structure, that incentive compensation. So it was not just motivating the salesperson to sell as much as he could sell, but it was motivating them to sell profitable jobs. And so we had to put in conditions of profitability and incentivize higher profits on jobs to motivate a balanced behavior. But initially, the incentive structure didn't motivate the right behaviors. So you need to be careful about in setting up incentives that they're driving the behaviors that you want. There also needs to be an easily perceived connection between the reward and the achievement of the goal. It needs to be understood by employees. What do they need to do to realize a particular gain? If you have incentives like, giving employees a bonus when the company does well on the bottom line, that's not really a bonus system. It's more just profit sharing, because employees aren't seeing or knowing what they need to do during the course of the business day, week, month, to specifically impact that goal when it's an after the fact type thing. You come and report the results and say, okay, we did well, so we're going to share with the company. What you need is something that all during the course of the work periods, employees know that if they do this, then they're going to get more. If they don't do this, then they're going to get less. So it motivates them to be driving to achieve a result. Okay, so there are a lot of different incentives and reward types, and a lot of people think more commonly about dollars. And dollars are important, and probably the most preferred. People want more money is typically what first thing they're asked for, but that's not always the most effective. We talked about there's team goals and individual goals, but sharing the profits of the company, profit sharing, can be good. There also can be targeted bonuses for specific accomplishments to the company. You can say, for instance, if we go for the next month with no safety incidences, let's say we have no OSHA recordable incidents, no safety problems, then we're going to knock off for a half a day and we're going to go bowling in the afternoon, something like that. So that's a targeted bonus for a specific goal accomplishment, and that goal may be in line with your annual business goals and your long-term business plan, but you're motivating the team by giving them a specific target that's short-term, and the incentive has two benefits. People like time off, obviously, and the opportunity maybe to go bowl or whatever, but it's also a good team building opportunity. If you got a team of 4 or 5 people, it's easy for people to spend their time focused on doing the work or doing the job, but there's a lot of value in getting to know the employees outside of the work environment and shifting their minds away from the day-to-day job into something else. So mixing financial goals with experiential goals like this, pizza parties, time off, customized. Down at the bottom, we talk about on an individual basis, there's pay raises, bonuses, commissions, but the non-financial things like time off mean a lot more to some employees, or customized incentives like you may have an employee that loves to play golf. Okay, so maybe you take off an afternoon and go play golf with them, or maybe you give them a coupon or a ticket to a free golf round at a particular nice country club or something like that. Or maybe an employee is a big sports fan. Maybe they're a Jaguars fan, so you give that employee 2 Jags tickets to an upcoming game so they can go see the game. So these types of incentives and rewards mixed in with the financial can go a long way. Those types of awards also are very good for impromptu type awards. Maybe if an employee on their own thinks outside of the box, comes up with an idea that's outside of their normal job responsibilities to help make things better for the company, things like that are good opportunities for these customized experiential type awards. Okay, so once we get through the objectives and the incentive processes, then the meat of this discussion is really how do we take action to drive improvement and achievement of our goals, the tactical action planning side of things. Without action, without specific detailed action plans, then effort's not going to be made in the right direction to achieve the result. So the actions that we take must be specific, they must be well defined. There must be an owner for each actions, and they must be measurable. The actions are very similar to the goals in that they must be measurable, they must be well defined. And so there is this next page is an example of an action plan, and I'm going to walk through this. This is a specific example of an action plan, and the goal for this, let me explain. This is for a hypothetical company that manufactures widgets, and there's a department of 3 people that work together. The first person does the first few steps, then they hand it over to the next person and they do a few steps, and then they hand it to the third person and they finish the product and pack it in a box, kind of an assembly process. And there's way too much work in process or inventory. There's a whole bunch of product in between the 3 steps, and the business has a lot of dollars in that product, and when there's a defect may be found at the final inspection, there's a whole lot more product that has to go be repaired. So ideally you would have less work in process and less inventory. So the goal is set to achieve a specific target level of inventory. So then you come down to, all right, how do we do that? Well, this is an action plan of how we achieve a lower level inventory target. The first step here in the description of the action 1 is defining how much is our targeted or maximum level of work in process between step 1 and step 2. And Fred has the action to go do that. And we are challenging Fred to go do that within a week of this first meeting that we have. Fred needs to define a max level, say 10 or 5 or whatever it is. Then the next step is, once Fred defines what the target maximum level is between those 2 processes, we have to create a physical structure or a limiter or container or something that will not allow more than that number to be between operation 1 and operation 2. And so we give that action to Jane to design the container or structure. Could be a spot on the floor that's taped off. Maybe the maximum amount is number of pallets of product. And so we tape out a square on the floor that will only take 4 pallets, and you can't go beyond that. Maybe that's what Jane comes up with and designs. So then the next step, once Jane defines the container or structure, is George is assigned the responsibility for fabricating these containers or controls. And we give George till June 15th to do that. And at the same time, Sally needs to start defining how we're going to use this new system, writing a few instructions on how we use what's called a Kanban, and what happens when you get to the maximum level. What do you do if you're an operator 1? Do you stop? Do you then go help operator 2 get caught up and move the product down the line? More than likely, that's what you want to do. You don't want operator 1 to keep building and keep building, so we accumulate a bunch of product. You want them to go help the bottleneck operation and move the product along. So Sally's going to write a procedure on how to do that, okay? And then after the containers are done and the procedure is written, then the next step is Sally is going to train, operator 1, 2, and 3 on this new system, the new procedure, the containers, how to use them, all that kind of stuff. Then once the training is done, we implement the new process, okay? The team starts using this new process, but the job isn't over then. What we need to do is monitor how well it's working. Is the line balanced? Are the limits that Fred created at step 1, are they the right limits? Maybe over time we find out that the limit of 5 is too small. It causes us to stop processes too frequently, and we need to increase the limit between step 1 and step 2 to 10 from 5. Okay, so it's important to have a monitoring process and adjust, if need be. So then you take the steps to resize the container and optimize it to 10 instead of 5. So the end result is then once you've achieved that desired target level, then the goal should be achieved. The inventory level should be down to what the goal was. But the whole point of this is, without going through the specific action plan like this, nothing would have happened to go create less work in process. There has to be detailed specific plans put in place with owners defined, time bound, what's expected when, and then you need to measure that and make sure that the actions are actually getting done. And all that kind of leads us to the next and final step of the process, which is our system of governance. Follow through and execute. Ross Perot, who many of you may not know who that is, he was a gentleman that ran for president a number of years ago. He had a quote, "Most people quit at the 1-yard line," and that's so true. You can go through a whole lot of planning, a whole lot of discussion about how you want to do things. You can create these to-do lists and create these plans, but if you don't have a system of checking and governing and following up, they never get done. Let's use the example of your to-do list. If you're a sole proprietor and you don't have any employees, then a lot of what we're talking about here today may be just creating a bunch of to-do lists. You have a daily and a weekly task list of what you want to accomplish, things you want to do. If you don't review that list and go back and double check and say, did I do it today? And if you didn't get it done, move it to the next day's action, add new actions, update it, then the stuff doesn't get done. Or if you neglected to do something and you're not reviewing the list and monitoring it, then you may not carry that over to your to-do list for the next day or the day after. So you have to have a process of reviewing actuals and adjusting, monitoring the whole process. This can be, as I mentioned, just monitoring your to-do list if we're talking individually. If you're meeting with groups, this becomes a much bigger deal, okay? And I know most of you, your companies are small, so you're probably not going to have a whole bunch of different business meetings and meetings with different groups. If you do have to meet with groups in order to monitor the progress, then it's very important that the groups and the people, the individuals in attendance, see this whole process as valuable and not a waste of time. It needs to motivate accountability on people's parts. They need to see, visibility to the ongoing results and status, but it needs to be done in a way that people find it as valuable. It's got to confirm the desired results. The planning process, the action plans, the tactical plans that we have, they have to be looked at as living. If you get halfway through the process of trying to do an action plan and realize it's not resulting in the results that you wanted, you have to change. Like the example of the container, maybe figuring out that 5 wasn't the best number and we needed to increase the size of the limitation to 10. That process needs to be living so that you change and adjust the process. There is another acronym that describes this process, PDCA, it's Plan, Do, Check, Act. That is a process that's ingrained in the ISO 9000 standard. If any of you are ISO 9000 registered or familiar with the standard, you'll know that that process is ingrained in the ISO required standards. And a lot of this, everything we've been talking about, is essentially required within the ISO 9000 standard. But back to the meetings. If you're meeting with people, you have to respect their time, and they have to be productive and worthwhile. Set limits for a meeting, set an agenda, set a time limit and stick to that agenda. There needs to be two-way discussion, not just viewed as a reporting meeting, but something where it's a dialogue back and forth. And you need to give more positive feedback than negative feedback. If a meeting or get together is viewed as just being one where criticism is brought in the areas that aren't being met or the actions that weren't completed on time, then people are going to, not buy into this whole process. The review process is going to be different for different size companies. And obviously, if it's a group versus an individual, it's going to be different. One of the things from a personal standpoint that when I started this process in the company that which I was an owner, I tried to do too much, too fast, and it was met with quite a bit of resistance. I did not do as good of a job up front as I needed to in selling the process. And there was a perception of it being a waste of time in a lot of cases. And so I had to back up and I had to take things a little bit slower. And I had to think about how I could create a system of governance that wasn't perceived as a waste of time, as being beneficial. One of the things that I did is I looked for a lot of the reviewing that I would do would be one-on-one with individuals, maybe talking about individual goals. And this is probably the case for most of you. Your smaller companies, you may have 2 or 3 employees. And so you just need to keep an ongoing dialogue with those employees about their specific goals and the plans that they're doing. So these are one-on-one conversations. Well, if you can figure out how you can capture that conversation along with something else, and the example I used was we would go visit a lot of our customers and clients, and oftentimes I may take a sales guy or a project manager with me to visit a customer. So we're driving, some cases, hours to visit a customer, or often over a half an hour. Would take that drive time as an opportunity to just catch up on individual goals and individual plans they're doing. The employees are much more open to having that type of conversation then, because it's not pulling them away from doing something else that they need to do. If you schedule a specific meeting during the day to have a conversation like this, then you're pulling the employee away from doing their day-to-day job responsibilities. They could be doing something else at that time, and so they may be less inclined to want to have this conversation and participate in it. So think about how you can do it, what's the best time. They don't have to be formal discussions. You don't have to write everything down all the time, and you know, you can just check in informally. Doesn't always have to be the same frequency, once a week, once a month, once a year. If you do annual performance reviews, that's good. But if you don't do the annual performance reviews, still needs to be just a periodic check-in at the frequency that you're comfortable with and the employees are comfortable with. So how do you create this culture? You know, how do you get the buy-in of people to participate in the planning process, creating tactical plans, and monitoring progress and things like that? Well, you know, this gets back to battling a waste of time mentality. Start small. Don't try to make the mistake I made, creating too many goals, too many different action plans for people, and too much time spent on the review process. Start small, set yourself up for success. Maybe take one or two goals, one or two specific plans that each employee is going to work on. If you're having meetings, you have to have meetings with groups. You know, make them as enjoyable as you can. Donuts help. You know, donuts always help people want to come to meetings, but also make the process short, and try to tie meaningful rewards to the process from the very beginning. Make way for some quick successes. Make short-term goals. You know, if we do something by the end of this week, we're going to have a pizza party. So let employees see that there is going to be rewards that come with achievement of results. Again, it's going to look a lot different if you're in a 3-person company than for a 100-person company. I understand that. So, okay, so that's all I have to say. Are there any questions? Any discussion?
Hello, Tom. Thank you for a fabulous, in-depth, lots of information. If anybody on the webinar today has questions, I completely failed to mention this at the top of the hour. Questions, there is a question section on your control panel. Just open the little triangle next to that and you can type in your questions if you have any. I'm not seeing any at the moment, but it could just be information overload. Excuse me. Which happens quite a bit, but I will remind everybody that if you're typing in your questions, we'll give you a minute, but there's the contact information is on our screen right now. And as it says here in the blue box, if you want to make an appointment, be sure to mention to the client intake coordinator that you attended Tom's webinar today and you want to speak with Tom. You can do that. If you call that 800 number, you will get either Lisa or Ernestine, and they will hook you up. And as I mentioned before, there is an email that's going to go out in about an hour that will have all this information linked again and the link to the recording, so you can watch it through again if you need to. And I'm still not seeing any questions come in, Tom. So you might have already answered everybody's questions.
I hope they're not all asleep.
I don't think so. I'm not seeing exclamation points by anybody's name, which usually is, hey, they're asleep. So you're good. Oh, we've got one. Let me see. No questions, just presentation was excellent and to the point. Good job. From Celia. Thank you for the feedback. Nobody's asleep. We're getting another comment. Not asleep.
So, I mean, one thing I would say is, and I should have said this at the beginning, everything I've pretty much talked about here is probably nothing earth-shatteringly new to anybody. And you've probably heard all of this stuff before, So this is a lot of what I said is just a reminder. And, you know, it takes time to learn how to do this process. So you got to commit yourself to taking it in steps. If you commit to trying to do a certain amount, as you get comfortable with that certain amount, then you can grow and do more of it. I see a hand for something there. Is that a question?
Yeah, if there's a hand up, there is any advice on government contracting from Cassie. Tom, I don't know if you want to answer that. We do have a couple of government contracting specialists on staff. Tom is not one of them. He might know a little bit enough to be dangerous, but we do have specialists on staff that you can talk to, make an appointment with. And we do have a stash of training previous webinars on our website. There's a video library, and if you go to the video library, there are a couple of government contracts. One is getting started with federal government, and one is getting started with state and local government. So those might be good options for you if you're just dipping your toes into the government contracting waters. That might be helpful.
So
but yes, if you go to our events page, it's workshops and events is the tab, and just click on that, and then at the bottom of the screen it'll say check out our video library.
So just to add to what Allie is saying, we have a partner organization that we work with called PTAC, which you might need to help me with this. I think it's Procurement Technical Assistance
Center.
I'm not sure what the C is.
It's Center.
But it is an organization that helps small business clients with government contracting, with access to government contracting and getting through the process. We have a consultant who will work with you. Now, there is a requirement that you've been in business for 2 years before she'll really work with you on that government contracting process, because typically most government entities are going to look for suppliers having at least that 2 years of experience to have proven that they're viable before they take them on into doing government work. But if you have a couple of years worth of experience, then you might request when you call in to talk with the PTAC coordinator. She might be able to help you with that process. And I do have some experience with government contracting in the business that I had. A large percentage of our business was with the federal government. And so I had to deal with a lot of the red tape. I can say from experience, and one of the things that I learned is if you can do business with the government, you can pretty much do business with anybody because there's a lot of things you have to learn and things that you have to be good at to be successful in dealing with the government. But beyond the federal government, there's a lot of state and local opportunities too that are sometimes easier to get certifications for and get access to. And some of that how-to is in the videos that Allie was talking about on our website.
Perfect, thank you. I sent that link to you, Cassie. One question that I'm seeing here, does your sales staff have to be employees? I don't know if you covered that or not.
No, they don't. And it's quite more and more commonly, a lot of companies are using 1099 employees or independent contractors in a lot of roles, not just at sales. And when you start talking about bonuses and commissions, it is important to partner with, if they're employed through another organization, like a temp agency or a staffing service, you need to coordinate with them before you put in any type of incentive structure. A lot of times they're paid through another service. It's more difficult to offer incentives from the company. There are sometimes legal lines that you can't cross when the employees are not your employees in terms of what benefits you can give them, or they can lay claim if they get certain benefits to other benefits. So it's always good maybe to speak with a legal advisor if you have an attorney when you have those things that are in question. So just be aware that you can't always deal with incentive plans with non-company employees the same way you would with an employee.
Wonderful, thank you. And then one other question that came in, and you might need, this is from Sonia, you might need to elaborate, Sonia. Do they work with franchise business? I don't know if you're talking about our okay, PTAC. Yeah, do PTACs work with franchise businesses? I mean, I would imagine the franchise could do business with the government then. Tom, what do you think?
That's a question I've never heard before, and I don't know the answer. That would be one that our PTAC coordinator would have to answer.
Awesome, thank you. And then one more's come in. Is a 1099 worker considered a gig worker?
Say that again, considered a what?
Is a 1099 worker considered a gig worker?
I don't know what gig is.
I've heard that it's kind of a buzzword in recent years, like gig work. You work certain gigs here and there. Oh, I have a gig over here, I have a gig over there. I think it might be a 1099, like contract work.
Okay.
Or if it's just a buzzword lingo kind of thing.
Yeah, the 1099 is just the document that they need to fill out and go on record. There's a limit. Employees can work for you up to a certain dollar amount, and it's not very high. I know it used to be about $600. So if you have an employee that does work for you that's not on your own payroll and it reaches beyond that certain level, then they have to fill out a 1099 form for tax purposes, and you have to include that in your reporting. But they are paid a lump sum with no taxes taking out, and the employee is responsible for their own taxes and, Social Security, those types of things. You don't deal with the payroll deductions. You just pay them a flat rate.
Cool, thank you. All right, I think that sums it up. That's the last of the questions. I'm not seeing any more come in. So with that, hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you for attending. Tom, thank you for a wonderful information loaded, very insightful webinar today. Everybody on the call here, please look out for that email I keep mentioning. That'll be out about an hour. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.